Okay, so we are going to start with the definition of a function. If you were in class, you saw the video of the vending machine. If you were not in class, I'm posting that as a separate video. So you might want to watch that first before you watch this one. But basically, the definition of a function is that every button has exactly one unique beverage. And that would make more sense if you had watched the video on the vending machine. So if not, make sure you go back and watch that. But for our purposes in algebra, a function is when every input or every x value has exactly one unique output or y value. Okay, so we're gonna, let me just move this a little bit. So we're gonna look at two different representations. We're gonna look at tables and graphs, and we want to be able to determine by looking at the table or the graph whether or not they are a function. And there's not a lot of work that goes into this. It should be very quick. So really, whether something is a function or not from a table, we need to make sure that there are no repeating x values and that every x value has a corresponding y value. So that's how we're going to check from a table. And when you're looking at the table, I've outlined over here in the rainbow pen the questions that you want to ask yourself. Okay, so are any x values repeated? If not, then we're good. Does every x value have a corresponding y value? If yes, then we're good. So both of those things have to happen for something to be a function. Okay, and just so that you know what it would look like, if we look at table A, if there were no y value associated with an x value, your table would look like this. You would have like a dash instead of a number. Okay, so we don't have any examples like that in our notes today, but you could see it in the future. Okay, so if we look at table A, are any x values repeated? Well, 2 is repeated over and over again. So that means it's not a function. Okay, so I'm going to write that down, that 2 is repeated. The x value 2 is repeated, so it's not a function. Okay, we don't have to check anything else. We have one of those violations, so we're labeling it not as a function. We're going to move on. So if we look at table B, we want to look in the x column. So we want to be looking right here. And we want to make sure that there's no number that repeats. And there's not. We don't have a value that's repeating. Then we want to take a look and make sure that every x value has a y value associated with it. I don't care what that y value is, as long as it has a y value, we're good. So B would be a function because no x values repeat and every x value has a y value. Okay, let's take a look at C. Do any x values repeat? 0, 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36. None of them repeat. Each one of them has a y value, therefore that is a function. So C is a function because no x values repeat and every x has a y value. Okay, going back up to look at D, looking at the x column, none of my x values repeat and every x has a y. So D is also a function for the same reason. No x values repeat, every x value has a y value. Okay, we're going to go back up to look at E, and if we look at the x column, if we look at the x column, you can see that we have 3 repeating. You can see that we have 2 repeating. And we also have 1 repeating. So because those x values are repeating, this is not a function. Okay, so the x values 1, 2, and 3 all repeat, not a function. Okay, short, sweet, quick. Okay, you should be able to just look at the table and tell. Okay, now we're going to look at the vertical line test. So now we're going to look at a graph. So if we are looking at a graph, we're going to do what we call the vertical line test. Okay, and I want to make sure that you write this abbreviation down. VLT stands for vertical line test. Okay, so if something is a function, it passes the vertical line test. Okay, and what I mean when I say passes the vertical line test, it means a vertical line never touches the graph in more than one spot. Okay, so if it passes the vertical line test, it is a function. If it fails the vertical line test, then that means that a vertical line touches the graph in more than one spot. Okay, and that means it's not a function. And you have an example right here. This vertical line hits that graph in more than one spot. So it touches the graph. Okay, it doesn't have to happen in more than one spot. It can just happen one time on that graph and it's not a function. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at some of these graphs. Okay, now normally I would say I would be demonstrating with my pencil as my vertical line, just moving my pencil left and right across the graph. We can't do that because we're virtual and you can't see me moving my pen or pencil. So I'm just gonna draw a series of vertical lines. Okay, and we're looking to see if these vertical lines touch in more than one spot. Okay, so as we move across the graph, you can see that these vertical lines are never touching my graph in more than one spot. Okay, so this is a function, excuse me. And all we have to say is that it passes the vertical line test, and we're just going to write VLT, vertical line test. Okay, now I'm looking at my graph for B, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw a series of vertical lines. And you can see that on more than one occasion, this line, these vertical lines are touching the graph in more than one spot. So when that happens, it is not a function because it fails the vertical line test. Okay. Let's take a look at C. Now remember, we are only looking vertically. So we're looking up and down, not side to side. Okay, so I'm only looking at vertical lines and I'm seeing if any of them touch my graph in more than one spot. They do not, so it passes the vertical line test, which means that it is a function. Okay, moving on to graph D, drawing my series of vertical lines. You don't have to do this, you can just use your pencil, but we can see that at no point does this graph touch a vertical line in more than one point. So this passes the vertical line test, which means it is a function. Okay, our last one. I'm not going to draw a lot of lines. I only need to draw one. And we can see that one vertical line touches in multiple spots. Okay, so this is not a function, and it is not a function because it fails the vertical line test. Okay. So that's it, short and sweet. Don't forget to check out that video on the vending machine if you have not done that yet.